Hey, welcome to Sermon Sessions. This is the teaching team at Bel Air Church, and what we're doing in this season is we're inviting people to kind of go deeper in what we're talking about in our Sunday preaching, and we're in the middle of a sermon series right now called First Response, and we've been sharing the teaching. Erica Faye, we're going to get you up teaching here shortly, but in this season, we're unpacking it, and if you've missed any of those messages, you can go, of course, on our YouTube channel, but also wherever podcasts are found, Apple and Spotify. But this week is First Response when you're afraid. And I'm going to take it a different angle than I took on Sunday. But growing up, what was something that caused you fear?
Oh, easy.
Oh,
Heights.
Wow.
Heights.
100%.
Heights. What did you have an
Oh,
experience?
absolutely. I still have it. It's
Okay,
still
so
it's
let's
living
talk-
with me right now.
Let's decom.
Well, there's a couple of experiences. One, my buddy didn't have a fear of heights, and he liked to climb rocks, and so we would climb cliffs. And I remember this one time where, we wanted to be safe, so we found a rope, and I don't know how old this rope was, but it was tattered rope, and we tied around our waist. And he would climb up this cliff. It was more like a sandstone, so it wasn't like it would fall apart and stuff. And he's climbing up this cliff,
Very stable.
super stable. And he gets up there, and I am petrified. I am literally like a rock on the side of a rock. I just cannot move. I am so afraid. I don't know. Was I 15 feet in the air? It doesn't matter. I was so scared. I couldn't go up. I couldn't go down. I was stuck. And that's like one of many. I mean, don't get me started on the Grand Canyon. I am afraid of other people on the
Even
Grand
thinking
Canyon.
about it, like your palms start to
I
sweat.
am.
You show me, and I'm like, oh my
Like,
goodness.
why are you taking
Yeah.
a selfie on the edge of the
Yeah.
Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
Not a
No,
good
don't
idea.
do
Question
that.
anyways.
Yeah, like why would you do that?
You didn't see
No.
Free Solo, did you?
No,
With,
I cannot. I
Arnold?
cannot watch that movie. That makes me so nervous.
Oh,
Yes.
I get it.
So that's one.
What about you,
Erica
Rebecca,
Faye?
Erica?
Well, I was thinking about actually kind of a weird one is that I wasn't afraid of public speaking, but I was really shy in elementary school. So I'd be very, very like quiet and not sure how to be myself. But then I would do these speech competitions and just go for it, So it was interesting, kind of like the difference of that. Because some people, most people are scared of public speaking, but that was the one thing I wasn't. But
Yeah, I got a classic one. I was afraid of the dark.
Okay.
Truly, I was, and I shared a room with my
like that.
sister. And even sharing a room with my sister, we had to have like a night light. The door had to be open to the hallway. The hall light had to be on. And even then, it was just like, is that a shadow? Did I hear something? There was still
Yeah.
a sense of fear in the darkness.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of gone away as an adult. But sometimes I'm like, what was that? Turn
Did
the
you
lights
hear
on,
something?
Mike. Did you double check the doors? Like there's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Dun-dun.
Oh.
Jaws.
Oh, that wrecked me.
Dude.
Wrecked me.
Hey.
Even in
Wrecked me.
pools.
I can't even.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
you can't
well,
swim in
here's
dark
what-
bottom,
Let's see.
In nice
black
ones.
bottom pools.
Yeah.
That's
Can't do
how
it.
bad it was.
Oh, yeah.
I had this weird thought as a kid that in a swimming pool, if I went under, that I would come up out of the pool and I'd be in the ocean surrounded by sharks.
That makes sense.
So I didn't want to go into the
Wow.
water. And I'd have dreams about swimming away from a shark, and I couldn't get out of the water. Just terrifying, right?
Yeah.
We watched that movie way too young.
way
Let's just be
too
honest.
young.
Way too
Oh,
young.
Informed you.
I mean, the
That
80s,
sleepover we
yeah.
had where we were watching
Oh.
Jaws, that was the
Wasn't
bad
it like
idea.
PG? The first one that came out, you're like, how is this PG?
Well, a lot of things were PG in the 80s.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's a different world
Yeah.
we live in.
Yeah.
But today, isn't
100%.
it kind of afraid? I mean, aren't you guys surfers a little afraid of sharks sometimes?
Oh, very much. Still.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
you guys
no.
are wearing like seal
I
costumes.
feel like I'm
in your-
caught in the middle of this conversation right now because if I say that there's sharks, then I might not surf as much because my wife might not let me
Here's
surf as
fear.
much.
Here's
So
what I do when Mike surfs. I say, please text me as you're getting in the water and text me right when you get out.
I think she's more afraid of the sharks than I am. Yeah, I had like an
One bite.
ankle bracelet that was magnetic. They were selling these things to convince us that the sharks didn't like the magnet.
would deter-
Have you
yeah.
seen this?
No,
And so
I'm
you-
buying it tonight.
It's real. Like
or
there's
you
some in
paint
Australia.
your bottom of your surfboard a certain color so
Stripes.
that if they see it, they're like,
Stripes.
"Oh, that's a." Yeah.
Sharks don't bite stripy things because they're poisonous. So the Australians totally get this, right?
Yeah,
So
right,
okay,
yeah,
what
yeah.
they do
Because they never get bit.
No, they get bit all the time. That's why they have all the technology.
What are we
See, I've done
talking
the
about?
research. Got it. Yeah, good times.
All right.
Fear.
So yes, sharks
Gotta love
is
it.
a big.
You'd say so. On one hand, there's like healthy fears, right? And I talked a bit
Right.
about in the sermon, without going into the details of like part of how God has wired us, kind of beautiful in our brain. It helps us detect dangers, and we've kind of learned from our ancestors and been passed down, all the things that trigger. But really, the focus of the sermon was what happens though when we're afraid of the things that God calls us to do. What happens when we're afraid of, maybe say it this way, afraid of the wrong things?
Okay.
So when we're afraid of being wrong,
Right.
and we never put ourselves out, afraid of failure, afraid of, you know, standing up for someone out of fear of what that means for us. So we've talked about, you know, heights and public speaking and the dark and Jaws, but what comes to mind when you think about something that you're afraid of that is a misplaced fear?
Oh, yeah.
What are things that come to mind for you? And even our listeners right now might be able to self-reflect on themselves.
Well, I think maybe it's not so much a misplaced fear, but it's having had a bad experience and then having to face that again. And you have all the flood of the memory of failure or shame or abandonment come back into the space. So you don't want to try again. That's probably what I would say for me.
Is there an example that you can think of? Or a
Gosh.
category of things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I grew up pretty perfectionistic, so I would not want to even try. It would be like, you know, like the basics of like learning scales on the piano, or it'd be like, I'm so terrified to mess up or have a problem here that I'm not even going to kind of attempt to do this, you know? And then, I mean, I would say like recently in more like a emotional sense, like I think dating in Los Angeles, like I think, you know, like that's a real topic right there,
That's
you
good.
know? And I think I was so afraid to like step out and make a mistake. And I think it was about like 10 years ago, I was like, get over yourself. Like just go out and have a drink or have a meal and just keep it like don't put this expectation on it. I know a lot of my friends can relate to that, but I do when I counsel people who are still single. Like a lot of it is the fear of like, what if this doesn't work out? What if I'm too vulnerable? But it's like, you kind of actually can't get anywhere unless just you go for it, you know? So that's probably a more recent journey I've been on.
We kind of need
That's good.
spaces to fail like small
Yes,
ways
absolutely.
because everything feels like if I fail, it's going to be massive. And one of the things and this is an aside, but I've been working with kids on how to train them how to swim. Okay. So 3-year-olds to 7-year-olds. And I start them with Joshua 1:9. You don't have to be afraid. You're strong. You're courageous. You don't have to be afraid. I'm with you. Now I know I'm not God, but I'm just teaching them this idea that they're not alone. Right. But what I've learned is that if you take them away from the side of the pool too far, they're like, I can't do that.
Right.
I won't even try. And like a little thing of just like, put your head down and kick to the wall. No, I won't put my head down. I will not kick. That's too far for me. But if I put them closer to the edge to where they feel like they can just go a little bit and reach and grab, they'll do it. And I feel like we are in the same way where we won't risk big. Right.
Totally.
So we need spaces that we can fail small
Absolutely.
and know that someone's going to be there with us. And that's where it's like, God, I'm trusting you. I want to trust you in this big thing, right? And we present these massive things like, trust God in this massive thing. And they're like, I don't think I can. But let's try trusting God in this smaller thing right here. And let's see how that goes, you know? And then we can go bigger and go bigger and go bigger. And so I feel like we don't have those spaces oftentimes to fail small so that we can then start trusting in the bigger things.
Totally.
Love that.
It's good.
What about you?
I have so many thoughts in my head. I have like relational things, work-related things, family issues. One thing I remember hearing recently to bring up another kid example was a mom telling her kid who was saying, I'm afraid. Like, I'm scared. I don't want to do it. I'm scared. She was like, you're not scared. You're not scared. You don't need to be afraid. You're not scared. And I was like, no, you are scared.
Yeah, right.
I probably overstepped. So, but I was like, no, you are scared.
Right.
And that's okay because you're going to do it even though you're scared, right? And that's what
Right.
courage is.
Absolutely.
Courage is doing it afraid.
Totally.
And I think the whole sermon, what kind of summed up for me is you were like, it's not that it's just going to magically, God's going to make our fear disappear. But the point is to do it, to walk through the valley and have courage because God is with us in it.
yeah.
You know, and I think for me, when I think about what's hard sometimes, and this might be a shock, is confronting somebody who's like hurt me or done something. Because actually, instinctually, I don't really want to do it. Like, genuinely don't. But I've seen that doing that takes courage and ultimately brings freedom, right? So I've done that enough times to trust it. Doesn't mean it's still not hard to do. It's gotten easier, but to go, God's with me in this. But even prior to that, I feel like there's a sense of prayer and discernment, right? Like, God, search my heart. Like, I love Psalm 139. Search my heart, know me, right? See if there's any like offensive way in me prior to confronting, because sometimes I feel like we can have those moments of like, I need to go talk to somebody, but first I need to check myself. Like, what is mine to own? And then what do I need to talk to this person about?
Yeah.
There's this quote, actually, I think it's one of your favorite people, Henry Cloud. He says, he kind of defines like a safe person as somebody who's confrontable. And I love that idea of like, I hope that I'm also somebody confront me, like I want to be a safe person for that. Right. Anyway, that's kind of aside, but the whole point is like having courage to have a hard conversation with somebody with love, not in rage or finger pointing or it's super defensive, but just like, I'm going to do this. God's with me and I'm going to have the courage.
And I think it kind of ties into what you were saying about, I think Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this concept of a window of tolerance, like how much pressure can you hold until you lose it and you go into fight or flight and you're not in actually the ability to make decisions. And I think, especially with like the scaffolding experience and confrontation or even dating or any of these things, it's like you want to learn how to find safe people and pick a small topic. Like generally too, even with like confronting people, for me, it's like I'll confront somebody in a small topic and see how they show up, right? Sure. And if they can handle that, then I know I can move forward and go into deeper things. Right. But if they actually get defensive really quickly and it's not a two-way street where we can really talk further about it, I go, okay, you know what? We're not on the same page and I'm going to bless and let go, Yeah. But like even that, like learning, okay, actually, I don't need to do all or nothing here. Yeah. I can just kind of pick what is the first thing we should talk about, and how did that go?
That's good.
So it's like a baby step. You're putting your toe in the water of like, can I do this? Like, can I?
In that you're asking the questions I think that you posed in your sermon, which is, am I loved? Am I safe?
Totally.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm testing this out to see, am I loved or am I safe? And I think one of the biggest fears is actually sharing yourself with somebody, right? Yeah, because if I share myself with somebody, then I might not be loved. I might not be safe. And in this current context we find ourselves in our political climate and social context, in our spiritual, our theological climate, is like, can I really reveal who I am? And if I do, what's going to happen? What are the repercussions going to be? And so we start kind of teasing it out a little bit to test the waters a little bit, But we have to be, and I think, Henry Cloud would say this, is that we need to be safe enough people. There's no safe person. None of us around this table are safe. But can we be safe enough to where we might be able to extend that and say, you know what? Thank you for sharing that little step with me. And I'm going to demonstrate that I am safe. I do love you. You are safe enough with me. And how do we model that? How do we live that out in our churches, in our homes, those kinds of things.
Right. And every single one of us are in leadership roles. Many people listening have different aspects of leadership. And one of the things that I'm fearful of is I'll always choose and want to always choose relationship. But I can only do that on my side of the relationship.
Right.
And sometimes leadership, especially when it's for hundreds of people or thousands of people, I think about, let's say 2020, I had some very strong opinions on both sides of the pandemic. And, having to navigate best as possible with decisions that we had to make in terms of how we were gathering, how we were shepherding community.
It's hard.
And people ended relationships because I didn't lead in the way they wanted to. Yeah. And that was a hard thing to navigate and a hard thing personally. So people would say oh, there is a decision that you can make that will make everyone happy. Right. And that's such a lie of the enemy. Totally. And I didn't say to that person, get behind me, Satan.
No, but you wanted to.
But inside, in your heart.
Get behind me, Satan. Because that is the lie. There's this thing that you can do that will make everyone happy. And sometimes the fear is, making a decision that I feel called to make.
Right.
Whatever it might be, and that I'm going to lose relationships.
And
that's so hard.
Yeah, I cut you off there. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. But just even in that, it's because of that experience, because of the weight of the emotional, if you don't deal with yourself and you don't regulate and you don't actually process what's coming up for you as you're being, people are having different opinions about the decisions you're making, you'll be afraid to lead again in the next crisis, right? And that's why it's so important. We have to have this scaffolding experience where we are actually, okay, I'm going to step out and be a little bit courageous and I'm going to draw a line that's going to anger people. But I'm just going to practice it. I'm going to let myself expand my window of tolerance for this situation and then also attune to myself myself and go, what do I need? Because that was hard. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even imagine. Like, and then be able to go, okay, Lord, prepare me for the next moment. And as a leader, I think that's where we have to make sure that we are constantly taking care of our own hearts, because that's where we get hard, we get protective, we start making decisions just harshly because we're like, you don't know me. But we want to stay tender in that process, even though it is extremely and difficult to please all people.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's the horrible goal to have anyway, right? Like if my goal to set out is like, I'm going to make sure everybody likes me and that everyone's pleased, I'm doing something wrong, right? Like I'm doing something wrong because we're not going to please all people. Is it like Eleanor Roosevelt who said something like, if you want people to like you, everyone to like you and be happy, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's strong. Those are strong words. And like, you're like, I know.
Oh,
You're
good.
like, oh, I know.
And as a recovering people pleaser,
Right.
I feel like I've moved past it, but it's just a different form of it. And here's the different form of it. I want to be in a relationship. I want to stay in a relationship with people.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's a much more like socially acceptable, especially within healthy communities, phrase to say than I want to please everyone. Like everyone knows people pleasing, but like who doesn't want to maintain a relationship?
Yeah.
But I also realize like, what's the passage? I always forget the exact citation. Live at peace with all people so far as it depends on you.
Yeah.
And so like I can choose that, but I can't choose how people respond to it.
No, and it's not like you're trying to burn down bridges. It's
No.
not like you're going out there
Absolutely.
burning relationships.
Yeah,
You're just
so
saying,
good.
hey, this is, the New Testament church, the early church, they were doing this all the time. They had all these different issues that kind of came up, and they're like, look, we're making a decision in this way. And people didn't agree, and they left.
Yeah,
And
was
it's
it
like,
Peter and Barnabas? Like, was it Peter and
They did.
Barnabas?
They
that
had a
parted
fallout.
ways?
Yeah, they
they
had a
parted,
fallout.
because
It's a fallout.
they had a fallout. They had,
Whole bunch
this
of
is
things
a
there, right?
whole bunch of topics.
Right.
Circumcision, if you want to talk about that.
Oh.
The circumcision group.
Monday morning.
Wow.
Why
Wake up,
not?
everybody.
Come on. I feel like it's in scripture. It's biblical.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, but there was a whole group of people that parted ways because they wouldn't allow the Gentiles to come in, right? And so we had to make decisions. I say we, I wasn't there, but we as a church had to make decisions at different times in our history. And as a community, we parted ways, and we continue to do that, not because we're seeking to part ways. We're not trying to do this, but we're trying to be faithful to the Spirit and saying, okay, this is where we're going. This is what we're trying to do. You might disagree with that. We welcome the disagreement, and we're not asking you to leave, but you're choosing to leave, and I can't control that. you know?
Right.
Totally.
And I'm not going to sit here and convince you to stay either, right? There's
Absolutely.
I think there's a sense
Yeah.
of like, it's not pleading with somebody to be like, no, like, let me help you. Like, are you okay? Are we okay? It's like, no, just, that's okay. Like, I'm going to respect your no.
There you
But
go.
I think too,
respect the no.
I was thinking back on one of the things you said in the sermon about the answer actually is to fear God, right? And we have to fear God first. And years ago, I was in a situation where my decision was going to it was going to change the course of my life, but I knew somebody had expectations for where I was headed and where I was going, but it wasn't where I was going to go. And I remember like being out at the beach and just being in this moment of like, Lord, like what? Because I think especially in my life, people pleasing is one of my issues. Is I just want to be faithful. I think that's always been one of my goals of just like, I don't need to be seen. I just want to be faithful. And so I'm in this situation where I'm like hearing this direction needs to go this way, but I'm knowing in my heart that like the Lord is like, actually, I've called you this way. And I remember just sitting on the beach and him just speaking so tenderly to me. And he just was like, so you're going to let one person down. It's either him or it's me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, Lord, like at the end of the day, like I want to fear you. And I know I still love this person, but I am going to let them down. I'm not going to be able to meet the expectations they had.
Yeah.
But I am going to meet yours. And I think that that's where we have to learn how to really feel like I loved what you were talking about on Sunday about fearing God, because that has to be the first place before we do anything that we're
And why don't we
do.
talk about that for a bit? Because Proverbs 9 talks about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I made a comment right before we began that I think sometimes I and people I've been in community with can sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes focus on an aspect of God's character at the exclusion of another aspect of God's character. So we might, for example, focus on God's holiness and power and majesty and might and lordship and forget God's tenderness and mercy and compassion and gentleness and forgiveness. Or sometimes we can focus on God's mercy and compassion and tenderness and forget the might and the authority and the sovereignty and the holiness of God. And if I was to imagine giving the congregation of Bel Air Church a list of commands and to rank order which ones they resonate the most with. Let me just choose 5. To love God, to trust God, to thank God, to follow God, and to fear God. I'm guessing fear God would be the lowest on the list. I'm guessing. Because I'm guessing that, I know I'll speak for my preaching, I don't focus on the fear of God. And I wonder if I am lacking. You talked about wholeness of God's character. And fear here is not a because you hate me. It's not the crossed arm disappointed. It is a Isaiah in the throne room of Isaiah 6, just overwhelmed with the majesty and the beauty and the power to be humbled in God's presence and then to experience that forgiveness and the reconciliation and God moving towards. But I'll confess, I don't talk much and I don't think much about God's consuming fire. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that here at Bel Air Church. What you hear me preach, knowing our context, I think I focus and maybe we focus a lot on the tenderness, the friendship, the love of the of God. But I wonder if we're missing something here.
So this is good. I love this conversation. We kind of chatted before we hit record on this podcast. I grew up in a church and in a family that really emphasized the sovereignty, the fear of God, the power of God. And it was really beautiful, but also with that came a message of like, God's going to be really, really disappointed in you if you mess up, right? So there wasn't a lot of grace. There was more shame. And I think that was just the environment. Bel Air, I feel like, has such a diverse congregation. I feel like the messages I hear are varied. I mean, you said you didn't grow up really going to church regularly, so like you didn't get the message like God was shaming you. And I was like, oh, I got that real strong for like 20 years. So I feel like it's pretty mixed. I tend to have more conversations with people that are undoing and unlearning the shame component of a God that's kind of just looking down his nose at them for messing up, rather than having many people who are just so full and saturated with the grace of God. So that's what I see, and those are the conversations I have. And that's why it feels like so moving for people to really have it emphasized, this unrelenting, unescapable love and grace of God. Because even afterwards, people are like, really though? Like, really though? Like, it's so hard for us to actually believe and trust. So I would say that for sure. But I feel like, and this is the beauty, I feel like if we could marry these two ideas, that is the best case scenario, isn't it? To be
because it's a counterfeit version either way of one without the other, right?
Right. They are actually, in fact, both, whether you can see them that way.
Isaiah perfectly describes that in the sense that he has this awe and wonder. I think the word fear is what we're really having to unpack because it's been so abused and by the church. We've used that word fear and guilt and shame as motivators.
Got to put the fear of God in them.
Right,
That's right. And we got guilt and shame.
That's the phrase.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd never heard that, but like I've heard people talk about that, right?
Fire and brimstone, the whole deal. Let's scare people in the kingdom. So we used fear to manipulate people as opposed to like the awe and wonder of who God is. Isaiah sees God is just struck by the awe and awesomeness and the wonderful aspect of who God is and is woed like, whoa, I am like, I shouldn't be here, right? But he's not met with shame.
Right.
He's not met with guilt. And we are unpacking, having been met by shame and guilt, not from God, but from people that have represented God and said, God is ashamed of you. You should feel guilty. And it's not the angel that comes and touches our lips for healing. No, it's like, no, we can now control you. God was never trying to control Isaiah. He gave him an opportunity, and Isaiah responds out of freedom. And so I feel like the awesomeness and wonderfulness of who God is should enliven us to say, God, I'm with you. I want to go with you. I want to be with you. But so often it's like cowering and like, oh my gosh, I got to hide from you. I'm afraid of
like
you.
an abused dog. Like I think of a dog that's been hit that's just like cowering in the corner. And like, that's not what Jesus wants for us. That's not what God is wanting us to do.
And I think what you're talking about was just, so key is the width.
Yeah.
Like Isaiah got invited into the presence of the Lord. Like he's like, I'm with you. You know what I mean? And in that presence, we see our ugliness, but then he's like, no, you're part of the family. You're not going anywhere. And that's the experience of like some people when we make mistakes or whatnot, past experiences, we were just like cast out of the presence of the person. But the Lord's like, actually, the fear of God is the acknowledgement that I'm around you. Like I'm with you. Like every Sunday morning we have the kids open the door for Jesus. And it's just like a prophetic act because I want them to know he's in the room.
Yeah.
You know, he's with us. And as we're practicing the experience of actually like the with experience with God, and the eyes of our heart being open, just like seraphim, like what a prayer, man. Like I want to see you like the seraphim, all the eyes. I want to have all the eyes
That
to
was
see
wonderful.
every perspective of who you are. And it's like, I'm actually still welcome here. I'm not being cast out. I'm not being judged. I'm actually being empowered and equipped to, because I am a voice, like Isaiah, his destiny was to be a voice to Israel. And the Lord's like, no, I'm going to make you so clean that you're going to speak with such purity that I'm going to send you forth to go do your destiny. And that's where he cast out the fear. Because now I know I'm no longer I'm covered by the Lord's love and I'm sent forth with love and with him to do my assignment. Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's
So
what I was
I
just
think,
thinking
Erica,
about.
what you're talking about though is I love this picture of opening the door for Jesus and opening the door for God to be with you. I think what we're having to navigate in some ways is what God is with us, right? Because we don't quite know the
That's a good
answer to
point.
that,
Yeah.
right? Does this God love us?
Right.
You know, is this God safe? And you know, sure, Aslan, you know, no, he's not safe, but he's whatever.
I disagree with C.S. Lewis in that.
Ah.
I do. I'm like, sorry, C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, whatever.
I think that is
I
the
know that
most
people are
safe.
listening to this and they hear that phrase, like, is God safe? No, he's
Right.
not safe, but
Yeah.
he's strong, or whatever Aslan says in that
No,
moment.
yeah.
But I feel like that's the question we're asking of, like, God, I want to stand in awe and wonder of you, but I still am wondering who you are.
Right.
And so we are helping people relearn the character and nature of who God is, because from the very beginning, we've been asking that question. From Adam and Eve, we've been asking the question, who is God really? And God keeps meeting us, keeps clothing us, keeps walking with us. He doesn't kick us out of the house and then say, I'm going to stay in the house. No, he goes with us out of the garden. God continually goes with us through our whole history of the narrative that God started from the beginning, the first garden to the last. God goes with us, but we're asking the question constantly as humanity, who are you?
Right.
Right? And so we're trying to help people really understand who this God is.
And we have finite minds. We're trying to
Sure.
wrap our mind around an infinite God. And I also mentioned right before we got on, I think if we, and for people to do that self-reflection, if you are drawn more towards the compassion, tenderness, friendship of God, maybe pray, Lord, would you reveal more of yourself, that I would be struck in awesome wonder that would cause me to just be even more grateful and more like, how does this come together? Like you are holy and you are just and you're merciful, so that it's not, because I think what happens is, and maybe this is part of my upbringing, I really only heard messages of God loves you.
Oh, okay.
That's all I ever heard. And so the shadow side of that was Jesus was my companion and I was in control. I was the driver.
Okay.
And every once in a while, he'd be on the passenger seat. Most often, he'd be in the trunk. So I took for granted the lordship of Jesus. So I was the Lord of my own life, and Jesus was here to bless my life. That was the shadow side of it. You talked a bit about your shadow side of the shame. And I just wonder if like there's this like, Lord, reveal more of yourself to me. Maybe I've grown up in that harsh, legalistic background. Lord, would you reveal through the power of your spirit, your tenderness, your compassions that are new every day? And then with that, and this is part of what I mentioned, I am drawn towards preachers and teachers and theologians that unpack the side of God's character that I'm drawn to. And I often reject preachers if I sense that it's on another aspect of God's character. So I'm in this like, okay, Lord, bring healthy teachers, healthy writers that aren't just reinforcing just an aspect of God's character, but the fullness of God's character.
Beautiful.
All things to unpack.
Good.
Yeah.
And what a journey that we get to go on with the Lord.
It's so good.
And
All right.
and I love what you say though too, because I think that actually is the invitation to learn from people on the other spectrum, especially in our Bel Air community, because we all have different understandings of the Lord. And so it's actually like when someone maybe tweaks you in your vision of who God is, be like, I'm going to lean into that. Tell me more about that. What have you learned about God in that area and Lord? And that actually is part of the with experience with each other, not just with God and like Christ in us. And so, yeah, I want to just encourage everybody to do that. Lean into somebody that doesn't see the same way you do.
Mm-hmm.
Bel Air's a great place for that.
That's
We got
true.
people all across the spectrum, which is
We know
so
it well.
beautiful and it's so difficult. But thanks for joining us, and we're wrapping up our time today. And as we continue with these sermon sessions, join us, subscribe on YouTube. But blessings to you all on this day. Thank
Good
you.
to be with you.